Greetings, I'm Gerd Leonhard, futurist. I'm here in Cape Town, beautiful Cape Town, South Africa, with my friend Anton Musgrave from Future World. We're doing a show, The World by 2030. We've done a few episodes, and today we're going to focus on sustainability, green energy, what I call green futurists. I've talked about this for quite some time, but 10 years ago, this was sort of a nice to have. Many people said, okay, sustainability, CSR and all those things, like as Bertolt Brecht once said, dinner first, then morals. And now it's become mainstream. And I think what's happening is that we're going through a wave of revolutions. I call this, of course, the digital revolution, the infotechnology, biotechnology, and so on. And then the sustainability revolution, which is 100x of the digital revolution, really, in my view. And then ultimately the human revolution, which we'll touch on some other time. But today on sustainability and green futures, so I'm going to pass it over to Anton and get your take on what's happening, especially in this country, which is what, 72% reliant on coal.
Absolutely.
Big debate about solar energy in this country, big debate about next generation nuclear, and of course, the shutdown of electricity on a regular basis, right? As it's called, load shedding, right? Load shedding, and this is really a funny term, right? It's basically cutting it off, by design.
That's
but
right.
Anyway, explain.
So here we are in 2023, a world full of possibilities, full of exciting new renewable clean energy technologies, and we have an entire country with a leadership that fundamentally still believes in the future of coal. So there's no question that coal will be around for a while still, and is it 15 or 20 years? We don't know, but it's also undeniable that it's coming to the end of that curve. And I think that the pace is going to only accelerate. And I think that what leaders around the world across industries need to face up to, though, is this notion that sustainability can be doing tomorrow what we were doing yesterday so that we can continue to doing just that. And of course, that's a crazy concept. Right. I think we need to own up to a real serious home truth. And that is, Gerd, quite simply, sustainability is what's killing the planet. Because this notion that we just want to continue doing what we've been doing, and that's okay, is crazy.
Right.
So we need to say to ourselves, concepts like ESG, funky, sexy, consultants love it, doesn't change the dial, right? It's no different to balanced scorecard, triple bottom line, good governance has always been around. It's not going to change the movie. But what we really need to start embracing is even the quest to net zero is just an entry ticket to the game. We have to reclaw back some of the environmental impact we've caused to the planet. I call it the environmental overdraft. How do we pay back the overdraft and then bequeath our children a positive balance, if you like, a better planet? And so the environmental debate is going to escalate. It's going to speed up. It's going to become much more front line of everyone's role. It's going to be much more accountable. Taxes, policy, trade agreements, international trade agreements. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, we're just now at the point of where this is going to become a radical issue, not sort of a laissez-faire issue or a nice-to-have issue, because now the kids are coming into power. I call the kids, basically not the young adults, okay? Between 25 and 45, the millennials, our kids.
Yes.
And they're getting into the money, they're getting into politics, they're getting into business. 55% around the world of business by 2030 will be run by millennials. And they have a different view of life. And we, in our age, we're both boomers, right? So our life has been spent on doing the possible and doing the impossible and causing, as we sit here, roughly 50% of all CO2 in the last 25 years is our generation. And now this generation coming in saying, what is going on here? What are you guys been doing? So they're coming and they're becoming also radicalized to some degree, like Extinction Rebellion radicalized, by saying, there's lots and lots of ongoing things that we just can't continue, like frivolous traveling, like using energy as if it was nothing, like the polarization of energy for the rich and the poor, and all of these kind of things. So now we're coming to a head to where I think we're going to see a criminalization of things that are against the idea of people and planet. And that's going to start with coal, it always has. And so what we're going to see very soon, I think, is international agreements that coal must be phased out. And that was circumvented, unfortunately, at COP27, which it shouldn't have been. And the Swiss government also expressed great concern about this for the first time ever. Really what needs to happen is that we criminalize taking more CO2 out, more fossil fuel out, and burning more, and rather than leaving it in the ground and finding new ways. And coal, of course, on top of the agenda. So here in South Africa, it's quite clear that it becomes a way of being, let's say, perceived as not good. Right? And the European Union is making great progress on this idea. So basically, if you continue to rely on coal and build out more coal plants rather than solar and other kinds of nuclear possibly, then you'll be considered an unworthy trading partner. And this is happening in Brazil with meat and the Amazon. You can bet in the next 2 years, if Lula doesn't turn it around, people will stop doing business with or in Brazil, like they've been threatening all along. And the same is going to happen with coal. So we see a criminalization of companies like Aramco and others in the near future by saying that's what they're essentially doing is creating more problems with, and at the same time talking about the alternatives, but not doing enough. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's interesting how the pace of this change picks up speed, and it's not incrementally. It's almost exponentially. So you read about it. There will be lots of COP meetings. There will be Greta Thunberg's making a noise, and there will be some protests. But the volume increases, and then suddenly things start changing.
Yeah, it's like a wave, like back when India went independent. Gandhi had very little followers, but one day he said the right thing, and all of a sudden 5% of people were behind him, and 3 months later was 10%, and all of a sudden, boom, independent. Yeah, he never actually set out for it in the beginning. It just became a movement. And now what we're seeing right now is that maybe 2 or 3% of the population are seriously focused on sustainability and greening around the world, but the movement is swelling.
It's absolutely swelling rapidly.
Exploding. And in Europe, once we're out of the Ukraine-Russia thing, and that will happen sometime this year, I hope with a ceasefire or so, then all energy is going to be unpinned. Basically it's like you take a little bit of a pressure cooker.
Well, just think what's happening in this country right now. As you say, cute phrase, load shedding. It means blackouts. Yeah. Rolling blackouts every single day between 2 and 6 hours a day. Insane. National government still intent on controlling energy policy centrally. In Cape Town, the city we're in right now, just 3 or 4 weeks ago announced a policy to buy electricity back from households. Now, right now, that's all photovoltaic energy. 2030, what could that be? 2040, think about a mini fusion in my basement that provides energy. But the point is, you reach this tipping point where the energy equation changes. But the impact on grid management, for example, on the concept of a central government-owned energy grid. Think about America's challenges around infrastructure. When we start decentralizing power, decentralizing energy, decentralizing the management of that energy, new industries, new players, new opportunities.
Well, this is a huge opportunity for South Africa. I mean, we can see the Americans of all, that don't even believe in climate change, some of them, right?
Well, unless you live in California.
Yeah, they come on with a $380 billion bill, and that's going to end up being, people say, roughly 1.5 trillion when it's all said and done. America is positioning to go green. I mean, who would have thought of that?
Who would have thought
right?
that 2 years ago?
Yeah, especially with all the mix, with their Republican, Democratic back and forth, right? But finally, I think now what we're seeing is Larry Fink from BlackRock once said just last year that the next 100 or so unicorns, billion-dollar companies, will be in climate technology.
Yeah.
And we're talking about this whole development of climate technology, battery technology, precision agriculture, new kinds of fuel. I mean, basically, and it's all happening now. This is not science fiction, right?
Exactly.
So we just have to talking about ESG, we have to put our money into the primary applications of those companies that are driving that change, rather than harvesting a little bit of extra money here and there by having interesting mutual funds that have some ESG in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at these waves of change, the typical S-curve of any industry, it starts off in phase 1 with the science and technology, the research phase, the R&D phase. And lots of companies don't make it through to the second phase, which is when you create physical infrastructure to leverage the R&D. The third phase is the real business transformation phase. That's where you change business models, new industries, old ones die, etc. Very exciting. And then the fourth phase, of course, is optimization, commoditization, efficiency focus, etc. Now, coal and old energy is in that commoditization phase. It's the last dying movement of the cash cow. We already built the R&D around renewables. The photovoltaic cost is plummeting, technology is increasing. The infrastructure is being built right now. We're about to enter the early stages of the whole energy transition where we change industries and ways of doing things.
I mean, McKinsey says it's a $150 trillion transformation. And the latest calculation is roughly 2 or 3% of global GDP is required for this transformation. But on the flip side, if you're looking at the chart, you're spending all that money, but on top of that, you have a whole new green economy.
Yeah.
And you have an economy that employs, the World Economic Forum said, I think maybe more than 100 million people, right? And this is the new, the biggest change in the last 100 years of economy. And I think it's totally old-fashioned to think of that as a sort of wannabe, altruistic kind of esoterical concept, right? This is the new business model for humanity. And you can clearly see what's happening here. And I think any energy company, any country that's not on that agenda by 2030 will become irrelevant and get stuck in the past. And every country is realizing this, from Turkey to the US to Germany, and despite of the energy crisis, or because of the energy crisis, we're going to see radical movement here. Also, we're going to see radicalization of people who are sick and tired of it. And they'll vote for different people. And right now, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody as a politician who will go behind a carbon tax for flying airplanes. That seems like a death wish.
It's going to happen really, really quickly, right?
But this will happen. The first politician will say, I hear you, I'm for it. Right? This will definitely happen.
Well, in France, Macron has said, if the journey is under 3 hours, you may not fly in an airplane.
So, and that is also, we've learned in COVID, of course, that the mingling of the government in our freedom and in our decision-making is okay when it's about crisis, right? And the climate thing is a real crisis now. When we're talking about, we expected floods and all that torrents and all the, in 2040, it's already happening now, right? It's happening here, maybe a little bit less than somewhere else, but still it's getting warmer.
Absolutely.
Right? But look at California with the floods and the weather in Europe and people dying in India. So this was all stuff that was supposed to be, 10 years, and it's happening now. So we're entering a very true climate emergency status. As the UN Secretary General said, we either collaborate or we perish.
Or we die.
Right? And I think this is really, it's top of the agenda now. I think any business not going down that direction and switching to a people-planet concept, and not out of altruism or out of do-good kind of things, but this is a business model.
It's a business model, but it's just, again, a lot of our current thinking will become table stakes. And I think the leaders in certain industries are going to capitalize on how do we make this not table stakes, but take it to a higher level of impact and opportunity. So supply chains will be reimagined. Where we produce will be reimagined. I mean, COVID changed our theory of supply chain anyway. Look at what Ukraine war did to the energy debate in Europe. And they achieved the unthinkable. In 18 months of Ukraine crisis, we've achieved the unthinkable in Europe. In fact, it would have taken a COP climate conference 10 years to achieve that.
It was a great catalyst. But the other thing is that this kind of degrowth concept and the idea of how we grow into the future is being adjusted, because now we find that basically we have already been quite successful at decoupling the CO2 from GDP. Yeah. So if you're looking at the global curve, GDP keeps going up in every country, and then we have this curve, which is CO2 at the same, and then it kind of flattens out a little bit. And now we have a chance using technology and science and policy and regulation, of course, right, to bring the CO2 curve down while we continue to grow sensibly. And this is the important part. I'm not a degrowth guy, but I do think we need to mellow down on some of the things that were outrageous, like cruise ships and those kind of things.
I think we're doing that good. Our children are doing that. So our generation were consumers. Our children want experiences and utility. And that's going to be a fundamental shift in this quest to just own as many toys as possible. So we'll see less of that. And
less consumptionism.
That's consumptionism, exactly. And I think for me, this concept of degrowth is opposite to basic human nature. If you're not growing, you're dying. Nature shows us this. If this plant is not growing and looking green, it's actually on the way out. So how do we maintain human aspiration, human purpose, human sense of achievement in a way, as you've said it, that is sensible? And I think every one of us are going to have to examine our own requirements, our own ambitions, and say, how do we do this sensibly? How do we grow? How do we deliver shareholder returns, stakeholder impact, and yet do it in a way where our great-grandchildren will say, wow, thank you, Granddad.
Well, yeah, I think there is a great component of personal activity here. Like I printed out this list, put it on my door as to what I'm going to do to cause less CO2. Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's hard. I'm lazy in that regard. So I mean, of course, I'm ultimately very guilty for traveling, of course. I do offset all my flights, but I got rid of my car. We're sharing a car and we don't use it much anymore. We're eating less meat. We're turning down the heat and all these little things, yeah? But I think it's really important that we don't just wait for the big paradigm change, but also do the little things.
And again, it's that collective force that has the ultimate impact, right? Yeah. And I think we should have a lettuce sandwich for lunch when we finish the show that was grown in the garden.
Well, I always say that the great thing about sustainability in the green future, that it's entirely possible. We have all the tools and tech we need and the science. What we're lacking is the will and the guts, the courage to actually implement what we already have, right? And that's because of the shift of capital, the sunk assets of the oil industry. And in oil and gas, you know, I know this intimately because I did some work in that sector a long time ago. Oil and gas is making roughly $2.5 billion profit every single day, right? And that's paying for a lot of futurists and advisors and, you know,
and technological innovation and so forth.
Yeah, and I think we need to shift that money, also public subsidy, for example, of oil and gas. Like, you know, I went to Spain the other day, and it turns out that for every filling of the gas tank, we get a coupon to give us money back because it was too expensive. I'm like, this is crazy, right? What you should be doing is to spread the electric car network and give subsidies to solar and, you know, go in the wrong direction. So this is a really crucial decision. I think any country that's not betting on a sustainable circular future probably won't have a future by 2030.
I think we should ban the word sustainable.
That's right. Let's invent another one.
We need a new word, right?
Yes.
Sustainability it's been hammered. It's lost its impact. It's got no emotion, and people understand it differently anyway. So let's just look to the future. Imagine a word that captures everyone's imagination and catalyzes action.
Regenerative.
Regenerative has got to be
circular, right?
Circular must be.
Right. Circular is also one of those things I take and I give back. You know, I did an event for the airline industry the other day, and I said, if we have towns being flooded with tourists because of cheap flights, then we should be having a tourist tax that allows people to still live there that are being flooded with all these people on Airbnb. You know, that's the same kind of concept. So circularity is crucial, regenerative, right? Collaborative, right? And collective, which is also saying, and this is a really tough part, I think, on the agenda at COP29 or 28 that's coming up, right? On the agenda is that we ultimately have to pay the developing countries, right? And this is really developing, like India, Brazil, Nigeria, and so on, not South Africa. We have to pay for them to go green, right? And that is going to be a painful moment when we are paying them not to take it out.
But I think the world is reaching a point where we all understand we operate in a system. It's a closed system, and we can't allow large parts of the planet actually to do things that are ultimately bad for everyone. So what's the new model? Again, we need a new language and a new way of seeing it, I think.
I mean, if you're looking at that direction, you can also read Kim Stanley Robinson's book, The Ministry for the Future, The Ministry for the Future, where he describes what he calls the carbon coin, which is a global funding mechanism by the central banks to raise trillions of dollars for funding and keeping the CO2 in the ground and funding new kinds of energy. And I think that is coming. A lot of banks are talking about this. We need a vehicle that takes 2 or 3% of global GDP, turns that into a new asset class, and invests in all the new technologies. So by 2030, we have this kind of wrapped up that we're doing this. By 2040, we can take the CO2 out again, and we can bring the PPMs down to 330, you know?
Gerd, imagine regenerative circular being the rallying cry to align all the fractured geopolitics that's happening in the world right now. Because everyone realizes, actually, folks, we're in this together. So let it not be trade in the normal sense. Let it not be military might and nuclear arsenal. Let's talk about regenerative circular together as a system. And we get China, we get Indonesia, India, you know, and the rest of the world to collaborate around that. And all over the world, with little exception, the pressure is escalating dramatically to have that new conversation. And this is not a COP conversation. In fact, the COP conversation, I think, is burdened by too much legacy in all the failed COPs of the past. We need a new start.
I think it's going to come from all possible directions, including the COPs, including the UN, including the World Economic Forum. All of these people doing good things in components, right? But it has to create a mass movement.
But we need to align them.
Align them into one place where it says it's no longer acceptable if you're not circular, if you're not regenerative, if you're not on that agenda. We won't buy from you, we won't fly with you, we will just let you die out there in the desert, right?
And I think every leader, every person, every family is going to have to say, what am I doing? You've said it. But leaders in business and politics that run the world need to sit down and say, what are we going to do to be the catalyst for that new momentous shift in this domain? Or we dead.
Great, this wraps out our episode. Green is the new digital, sustainable is the new profitable. Anton Musgrave, Gerd Leonhard, the world by 2030. Thanks for watching. Hello, everybody. So sorry for the technical issues. Looks like we did have some fine-tuning issues with LinkedIn. Not enough technology used there. Oh, there's a bit of an echo there. Just 1 second. Check 1, 2. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hello, Anton. Are you there?
Yes. Good morning, Gerd. Good morning, everyone that's on the show.
Okay. So that was a really interesting show. I'm going to take this off while I'm speaking so I don't get my own echo. So it's been a great pleasure being there with you again. On the sustainability issue, I have a question to you, Anton. A lot of people are arguing when I do my speaking gigs, I hear this a lot, that we are currently in an era where people are retrenching on sustainability, which means they have other priorities, right? There's inflation, there's the war, and I keep hearing from a lot of people that yes, this would have been true some time ago when people had space for it, but now we're back to good old, going back to flying and just kind of not caring enough. So what's your take on that?
Good. I think the world overall is in a very precarious position right now. I mean, there are lots of these forces that are shaping the way people think and, of course, behave, the kind of decisions they take. So for many industries, many companies within those industries right now, it's about raw survival. And when you enter that zone, and whether it's real or not, it's more, in some cases, in my view, it's more almost in the minds of people, because our minds are being bombarded with lots of negative and worrying signals right now. So the automatic reaction is to go into survival mode. And in that phase, if you like, everything that's seen as absolutely non-essential, non-critical is cut, like investments on sustainability, positions in sustainability teams, etc. And the reason is that we're not even yet perceiving the imminent threat where we reach that climate tipping point where everything changes. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was in the Galapagos Islands. And in that small sort of microcosm, if you like, very important leading indicator area of climate shift, they're deeply concerned about the fact that even before the rainy season has started, the signs of La Nina in that zone of the world are so powerful that they're foreseeing almost catastrophic impact on that part of the world. So it's deeply concerning that we're not realizing the imminence of the impact. And of course, once that starts manifesting even more strongly, we will have to reverse all of these short-term knee-jerk reaction cuts in climate and sustainability investment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard some comments the other day that COVID in a way was like World War II. After World War II, we had a significant boom and the golden years in the 50s, and everything exploded after we had all that suffering. And some people are saying it may be quite similar once the Ukraine-Russia war is winding down, and somewhere or the other, I hope this year. Maybe that's an illusion. We'll talk about that separately. But if that happens, then there's sort of another wave coming in for the next level of sustainability. And I can see this everywhere, especially with the Gen Y, younger people between 20 and 40. This is like table stakes now. Right? And every time in my speeches I mention, the UN Secretary General, who says it's either collaboration or collaborative suicide, is what we're up to. And I get a lot of support from people saying this. I'm just a little bit concerned right now when you're looking at the policy of different countries, like the deglobalization, putting money back into weapons in Germany because of Ukraine, Russia, and that money should really be going towards the green economy. So that's something that worries me greatly. I mentioned this in my films just for those millions of people out there watching us. My latest film, Twice Upon a Time, has this scenario, twiceupon-a-time.tv, the good 2030 and the bad 2030. And in the bad 2030, we kind of show the scenario about how everything that we talk about isn't actually happening. And so this will be the worst nightmare, I think, that if we're not going to be fast enough. I gave a talk to the shipping industry a few days ago, and it was really amazing to see how many people in the shipping business still haven't realized, how existential this issue is. And, it's 3% of global CO2 is caused by shipping, and it's going up and up and up. And heavy oil, right, is being burned there. And I'm really wondering how we can turn that around? Do we have to see more pain there, or is it going to be with technology? I mean, what's your take, Anton?
It's funny you should mention the shipping industry. I'm just remembering a session I ran, a strategy session for one of the biggest ship engine manufacturers in the world. You know, where those engines are sort of 3 stories high down in the bowels of the ship, massive machinery. And years ago, the conversation was, what if we reach a point where we're no longer propelling these ships with these massive big engines? And just this weekend, I was reading an article on the very real now commercial reality of using wind power to power these very heavy, large container ships. And it feels strange, it feels impossible. And yet, if you look at the performance that some of these super racing yachts are now generating with fixed foils, I mean, reaching impossible speeds, you know, over 100 kilometers an hour. And if you then translate that technological step change into the industrial application, it's entirely conceivable that in the next 5 to 6 years, we will see applications of that. And already there are 1 or 2 ships that are experimenting with wind power. But it's again going through the step change of technological shift. And we all know, Gerd, when a step change happens, you can never go back to the status quo ante. It's over. The step change has happened. A new reality becomes the benchmark, becomes the entry ticket level of performance. And so we will see these shifts, even in these industries where it seems almost impossible right now.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because in my talk I used the example of this ship called the Ocean Bird. That's actually the one you're talking about, with the huge wind foils and stuff. And,
yes.
I used a quote by Einstein, who said that if something doesn't look ridiculous at first, then it has no chance of succeeding. And
I think,
and a lot of these guys in the audience were like, "Oh my God, the wind ship, that's ridiculous." It's like, and I think it's just so plausible. You know, it's I don't know, it's just a different viewpoint of things. But you know, generally with my talk on sustainability, I have this approach to where I would say that we have to do everything we can, all of the solutions, not just one of the solutions. So hydrogen, electric cars, wind ships, different kinds of fuels, all of the options that are part of what we are doing here, and at the same time also be more better with pollution and with waste, so that we can reduce the CO2 from that as well, and then eventually we get to a solution. But it is kind of concerning right now how we seem to be backpedaling. You know, when you go to the airport here in Zurich, you see thousands of people, you know, finally going on that trip again. And you know, I do a lot of voluntary offsetting. I think I said already on the video. But of course, that's not nearly enough, and it's one of those things where I'm wondering, like, are we really going to see a carbon tax for flying? You know, I think it would make so much sense for people like us, frequent flyers. And I've suggested to various airlines that they should institute a frequent flyer tax. So if you're a Honzirkel Lufthansa member, you get to pay. You have to pay to be part of the membership. I think that would be just the right thing to do, because, you know, it's 90% of the biggest pollution in air travel is done by the top 10% of people. And so I think that would make perfect sense. What's your take on the carbon tax?
Look, I think there has to be, again, a step change in how we manage this future. I think one of the biggest problems, Gerd, is the name. I've said it in the intro video as well. We need a new language. Sustainability has become so diluted over time, and as a consequence of lack of sufficient action, that people are bored with the name. People, when you say the word sustainability, everyone sort of says ho hum and yawns. And I think that's what we need to change, because that will be the catalyst. Now, how do we create that shift? Maybe some really aggressive interventionist regulatory framework around the impact of what we're doing will make people sit up and take notice. Either that, or, you know, either they'll take notice and respond positively, or of course there'll be a massive global revolt at the same time as climate impacts are becoming more profound and more dangerous and more costly and threatening lives, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, the question is, how do we change the conversation? And as horrible as the conflict in Europe, you know, Eastern Europe is right now, it's making people sit up and take note of some of the bigger global issues that we're grappling with. The shift from, you know, west to east, geopolitically, economically, demographically, et cetera. People are thinking about these things. But the climate conversation, because of this now very soft word called sustainability, it just doesn't have the gravitas and the impact in boardrooms that it desperately needs to have. And so maybe some really bold actions like, big taxes, and not just, $10 a flight, because really, at, the cost of an air ticket today, $10 doesn't shift the dial. So how do we get people to sit up and take note and say, this is serious now, finally, we've reached the tipping point. And, it was also, you mentioned Einstein, Arthur C. Clarke said, unless my view of the future is thoroughly unbelievable, you have no chance of being correct. Very similar to Einstein. And we now need to develop those crazy views of the climate planet future. It was 20 years ago that Julia Roberts made a video on YouTube called Earth. And she said, I don't need you. You need me. Speaking on behalf of the planet to all of humankind in her very sultry voice. And maybe we should all go and listen to that video again, because you don't see her face, sadly. You just hear her speaking on behalf of our planet. And she says, I have created species bigger than you, and I have destroyed species bigger than you. Of course, the dinosaurs come to mind. But maybe we should listen to Julia again and just, elevate the urgency in the front of everyone's minds.
Well, talking about videos, there's also a great video by Patagonia. I think it's on the 50th anniversary of Patagonia, where they talk about what Patagonia has done and what the approach is. And Yves, the CEO's position at the end is just mind-bogglingly on target. And I think this guy is, 80 years old or something. And it's just truly mind-boggling what they're up to. It's very inspiring. I think in general, there have been plans for carbon taxes on a progressive scale. For example, if you're a frequent flyer, the first flight would be $20, the second one $50, the third one $100, on that scale going up. So in my, I fly, 80 times a year. It would cost a lot of money. Yeah. But I think that is the right approach. And I think.
But Gerd, the point is, at 80 flights a year, and that's not the total investment in, you or me going from here to New York to deliver a keynote or to consult and advise a client on strategy. The economic cost, the investment is massive. Think of the cost of all the participants, speaker fees, venue fees, catering, all of that, logistics and so forth. So the cost needs to be relevant to that total investment cost. $100 out of a total strategy weekend cost is irrelevant. So it needs to be thousands of dollars, and that's the scale that's going to make everyone in the world sit up and pay attention. If you've been wanting to do a holiday for the last 3 years or 4 years, and suddenly you can, another $50 on your total spend is not going to shift your thinking. So how do we get 8 billion people to sit up and take note and say, I have to do the small little things, and so that collectively we start a wave of change? And it's only when you sense that fear, when that fear grips you about an inevitable consequence if you don't do something. It's like any other technological disruption. It's AI right now suddenly is getting all the airtime. Sustainability is off the airwaves. It's about AI, it's about jobs, it's about the future of work. That's the big new conversation. But it's because people have suddenly felt the threat is real.
Yeah, I think ironically, we're probably going to have a lot more threat in the summer now by another heat wave and people dying of heat, which already happened last year. But when we see that happening, it's going to become more acute again. And I think all of the warnings that we've seen, for example, in this great book by Kim Stanley Robinson, The Ministry for the Future, that we mentioned earlier in the conversation, all of those great scenarios are coming to reality now. And they're not 20 years away or 50, they're 5 years away. And in India, climate death, by overheating is an imminent issue. And when we see that, I think that may be a trigger, as sadly as it sounds. It certainly is bizarre that we need this kind of trigger first. But talking about artificial intelligence, we have a question here from Felipe Kirsten. Thanks for hanging in there. Please do, everybody else here, on the millions that are out there, please put your comments into the chat box so we can see it here on our admin. And again, we're trying a new system today. Unfortunately, we can't bring in the comments here, but we can see them. So Felipe Kirsten, thanks for asking, what are your thoughts about the relationship between trends in AI and sustainability as large learning models create more productive organizations? What is the role of ESG as a market force. Let's talk about the AI thing first, and I'll give a quick answer. I think really what's happening is that artificial intelligence at this point is really more of IA, intelligent assistance, and that basically means smart software. As I always say jokingly, computers are no longer stupid. They're still pretty stupid in understanding language and so on, but they can do amazing things now, for example, with ChatGPT and learning models. And they can help us to make everything more efficient and faster, more transparent, better data, better analytics, as long as it doesn't require human judgment. Human judgment is not part of the agenda with AI, because AI is all about patterns, about logic. It's not about meaning. So, and I think as long as we use AI in such a way where we say, okay, now we're like the superheroes of information. We can dig in, we can find solutions, and we can make everything more efficient. If we were able to make everything more efficient and faster and more organized, more transparent, for example, smart city, smart factories, smart agriculture, we could shave off 50% of CO2 right there, even without switching the energy. Right? And I think that is imminent, and that should be the primary use of AI, in my view, is to help us do that, and not to replace people who are creatives, like the script writers in Hollywood. So I think that is a great opportunity. I always say it's a big blue, technology, and big green coming together to create really powerful solutions. And there are hundreds of them, in terms of efficiency. If we can then also get a commitment from the tech companies to go green with their servers, which I think Google has been doing and Facebook is trying to do, and Apple is trying to do, then I think it should play out pretty well, as long as we keep the guardrails. My view is that we should always keep the human in the loop, what's called HITL in software, regardless of if it's more complicated or less efficient or more dangerous even, because that's how we keep control of the system. So my view is that this is not a panacea, but clearly smart software is better than dumb software, and smart systems are better than dumb systems, and this is really what's going to help us with sustainability. And I agree, we have to find another word for this. Yeah, let's say, okay. So what's your take on this, Anton?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head in a number of areas, Gerd. So I'm not going to repeat that, or just to reaffirm your view. I think humans in the loop is absolutely critical, but I think the focus on AI now needs to be shared, and it's not either or. I've said it in one of the previous shows. We need to change our way of thinking. It's not either or in the new world; it's and. So how do we blend the power of using IA and AI to solve all of the problems facing the world, whether it's healthcare, education, environment, etc., because we can use that as a catalyst for step change again. The challenge, and I've said it already, for sustainability is how do we regain a seat at the table? Because it's being superseded now by this new conversation that suddenly appears to be a greater threat. I don't think it's a greater threat. I think it's an equally significant threat. So we need to target both of them together. In Guayaquil, one of the big cities in Ecuador, again, I was there last week before last, there was a very amusing little stand selling the local national newspaper one morning. And it was a picture of huge floods around Guayaquil. I mean, kilometers, as I flew in, kilometers of just underwater residential and commercial areas. And the headline is, "And the rainy season hasn't even started yet," was the headline. And it was so funny because these newspapers were stacked up on a stand, and below the stand, the next shelf, they were selling lotto tickets for a gambling lottery. And I thought it quite sort of paradoxical that we have, on the one hand, we're selling lotto tickets. What's the lotto we're betting on? We actually betting, we're taking crazy bets on our future right now, and we're putting our money on the wrong numbers. And we need to wake up.
Yeah, I tend to think that we're still in the place where this seems like optional to a lot of people, and that's going to change very quickly. And I keep telling people in my speeches, that if you're looking at stuff like Extinction Rebellion, and I know they are contested in many ways, and of course I don't propose any violent action, but things like Extinction Rebellion, we're going to see this kind of thing times 100. Because people are just getting so pissed off about this. And what happened at COP27, the only good thing happened last time, in Cairo was that we agreed that we have to pay the southern countries to come along, which is huge, right? But it's really table stakes now. And basically, I always say, if you're not circular and sustainable by 2030, nobody will want to even talk to you. And you're looking like an idiot or like a criminal company. And I think people are realizing this. And this, we have to make this also our benchmark for paying dividends and for for people getting compensated for their work. If they haven't ticked the planet box and the people box, they shouldn't be getting a dividend, and we shouldn't be issuing stock returns and stuff. And I think once we have that on the agenda, and this has been suggested by the likes of Unilever and the Business Roundtable and others, and of course the World Economic Forum, which is by the way trying to do a lot of things right here. It unfortunately hasn't been perceived as such a lot of times, but this is basically something that we really need to do, is to change how the stock market reacts to me becoming sustainable. One Swiss client that I have here, I can't divulge the name, but I've been helping them for a few years, and they keep telling me that they really want to do this and emphasize the green future. But every time they do, they get whacked. The stock market says, "No,
absolutely.
What are you guys doing?" I think you had the same experience, right?
Good. It's very interesting when you look at the innovation premium that some companies attract on the capital markets of the world. It's when your stock market value is higher than the intrinsic value of your business. If you look at its cash flows, it suggests the capital markets are saying, we reward you now in advance of your future success as an organization. That is assuming that company is doing all the right things from all perspectives, not just the environment and climate and people, but collectively are going to create a relevant future that is exciting, aspirational, and positive. And yet, when you look at those very same companies that are attracting an innovation premium, and you say to the leadership, write down for me the top 10 assumptions that underpin your business model today in 2023. The first observation is very often there's a debate amongst the leadership team as to what those top 10 forces are that underpin their business success. But once you get to the list, you then say to them, now close your eyes and imagine 2033. In whatever shape or form you personally perceive it, how many of those core 2023 assumptions remain valid? And my experience now across industries around the world is that almost 50% of today's assumptions no longer hold true. And it'll be interesting to ask every leadership team of every company listening out there, how many of your company's future assumptions around the environment actually stay valid? How many of your assumptions that your today's cost cutting on sustainability initiatives will be the right decision when viewed from the future looking back? And how do we develop the power of hindsight about the future? Well, we've got to go there. We've got to imagine. We've got to talk about it. We've got to agree. What does that future look like as a consequence of the kind of things that we and many other companies are doing today? And then I think leadership's going to get a wake-up call, because they're going to realize that as they're trying to save costs now, maintain the dividend that Wall Street is demanding, etc., they're actually making the wrong decisions today for that future. And they will be sorry, but it might be too late.
Yeah, I mean, great point. Talk about the assumptions. I saw a chart the other day, I think it was from the Atlantic Council, showing how basically the idea that it's just going to cost money to go green and that's it, we're just going to spend money, is completely flawed. Because if we take, for example, all of the monetary effects of climate change and global warming, they're causing a destructive path in so many industries and increasing costs tremendously. So if we put it all together and we have some of the things that we have to pay and some of the things that we are getting, for example, new jobs, right, and new industries, this will all even out roughly in 2030 to be a net positive. So we're going to spend money, yes, so that's inevitable. We're going to see taxes, that's inevitable. But in the end, to deal with climate change is actually an economic undertaking that makes perfect sense on a monetary level, not just on an idealistic level. And so I just want to throw that in there. Maybe I'll publish the slide later, but it is kind of a misperception that we're just going to spend money to go green, and that's that, right? We do
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Anton, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Now, we have an interesting question from Xavier Go that says, what are the top 3 issues we should focus on the next 12 months? For me, one of the most important issues for leaders right now is to create a very clearly articulated destination at which you're aiming your business and ensure that that destination is aspirational. My challenge to leaders, and it's not something they teach you at Harvard or NCEAD or any other business school, is does your ambition for the future give your people, and by people I mean everyone that works for you, everyone in your supply chain ecosystem, and all your customers, do they get goosebumps from excitement? Or does your dream for the future give them a chill down their spine because it instills fear? And so step number one for the future for me is be very specific about the destination you're aiming all your business decisions at, the kind of people you're hiring, the kind of costs you're incurring, where you're cutting costs, etc. And make sure that that dream is aspirational for your people, because humans today are anxious. The levels of global anxiety are off the charts all around the world. So how do we re-inspire people, get them excited about what they're doing and why they're doing it? That's one whole area. The next, of course, is how do we then make that practical for them? How do we give them the tools? How do we optimize our systems? I mean, think about it, folks. Every single standard operating procedure in your business that was designed before March 2020 is by definition outdated. So do your standard operating systems unleash human potential and then make it simple and easy, or as easy as possible, for your people to chase that aspirational dream. And the third area, of course, is harnessing the capability of the tools we have today, whether it's computing power, whether it's using artificial intelligence sensibly. And remember, it's not AI or humans, it's and. So using all of the tools at our disposal today to go and create that exciting, different future. To me, those are the three areas of leadership focus. Thoughts, Gerd?
Great. We have a comment by Myron Hodge. He says, as for, or she, I don't know, she says, as for airplane travel, I am understanding that the cloud and vapor trail that the airplanes make reflects enough sunlight back into space to also be a problem and lower the Earth's temperature by several degrees. Yes, there has been a lot of research on that lately. I think this is one of the side effects of airplane travel. And I think certainly it's, in my view, it is two parts of the same coin, to where we say two sides of the same coin. One is that we probably should be flying less as much as we can by taking the train, for example, here in Europe. And I think Macron's on the right trip there, even though it seems dictatorial to prohibit people from flying from Paris to Lyon. But I think it's the right choice. I think it would be a wise choice in many countries where the train actually exists. You know, if you get off in Las Vegas at the airport and you're looking to take a train to LA, good luck. But in Paris, I think it'll work just fine. So we're going to put a lot more money into trains, and I think that is definitely, it's 100th, no, I think it's 150th of the air travel. So that is a top priority in the countries where that is possible, in my view.
Interesting, Gerd, that sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting that Warren Buffett 4 or 5 years ago started investing in rail infrastructure in the US. So he really did see the future, perhaps. And I mean, I think your point that it might be dictatorial of Macron, to dictate you can't fly to Lyon. The point is, the world needs actually now some benevolent autocracy to move us along. Because we're trapped in all of these movements, be it woke, be it, let's not rock the boat. But progress is never the consequence of reasonable people. And so we need some unreasonable leaders, maybe, to take unreasonable steps to provoke us into a step change of what we do and how we do it. And so I'm fully supportive of Macron. It's a tough decision. It's going to be unpopular. He's going to be slated for it. But in hindsight, we will say, thank you, Emmanuel Macron, for forcing us to make this change, because our reasonableness mitigates against taking the tough decisions. Sometimes
but of course,
it's necessary.
I think the thing about those decisions is we need to have more of a movement of people first to generate and empower the leaders, because leaders and CEOs, the same story. You will not see a politician that goes out on his or her own with such a tall story without being prodded by his voters or her voters. Right?
Yeah.
We've seen that with Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, all the great things that she's done. She hasn't taken it out of the blue. She was, this was the opinion and the push by the people. So I think if we have people asking for this, for example, I keep asking for this voluntary climate tax for all of the frequent flyers, until they do something about it. I think that would be utterly revolutionary for an airline company to do that sort of thing, which seems counterproductive, but it is not. So that kind of thing, I think, is going to happen, and I think we need to push for that. The louder the screaming gets around this, the more politicians are going to go behind it, and the more CEOs will go behind it. I think unless we reach this, what's called the Gandhi moment, 5% of the population just screaming and wanting something without necessarily becoming violent about it, then we have this groundswell where politicians will say, okay, I get it, I'm going to go behind this. We have one more question here, and then I think we have to finish the show for today.
Wrap it up.
So we have a question from Flux Art. How can we leverage generative AI to speed up the engineering solutions to bring net zero to scale? So how can we use AI? I mean, of course, my answer would be on this one. Generative AI is not necessarily a solution for these kind of complicated issues. I think what is a real solution to this is to use true artificial intelligence in the sense of data analytics, in the sense of automation, to help with this, rather than generative AI, which is primarily for creation. The scary part is, when you listen to Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, he defined AI as data and information turned into knowledge. That was about 3 years ago. And now we can safely say generative AI is data and information turned into content, which is even more scary when you think about how humans exist and the narratives that we tell each other. I'm kind of reluctant to look at generative AI as a real gain in these practical issues. I think it's something that is more akin to social media in many ways, also with the side effects. But I am hoping it will fuel the creative economy. For example, I am able to create funny videos like the one I showed earlier. Just 1 second, I will show this one actually. Kind of things, but this is a business model.
It's a business model, but it's just, again, a lot of our current thinking will
think a business not going down that direction. I use this app called Runway to create a computer model of me and Anton talking. Anyway, so I mean, I think it will be great for that to tell better stories and stuff, and that would also help the cause. Otherwise, I think I'm with the smart tools. I prefer to call it smart tools or intelligent tools to actually help us with this transition. Anton?
I again totally agree. I think the risk, of course, of generative AI is most people will not be paying for the most up-to-date data set. So generative AI is relying on a 1-year-old, 18-month, 2-year-old data set for a start. So hardly cutting-edge thinking out there to solve some of today's big problems. But I think it's the quantum computing space that I think is going to give us the big breakthroughs in helping solve some of the world's biggest technological problems, not generative AI. I agree with you on that one.
Well, I think the one thing that's really interesting is I think the idea, NVIDIA, I think Myron Hodges mentioned this as well, NVIDIA has now created a global computer scale model of live weather updates and forecasts using AI. And that, I think, is going to be an amazing tool for us to make decisions, to look at patterns, to understand the world better. And imagine, if we have a real-time computer model of all of the weather feeds, then we can really understand how things work and how they don't